All right, it's almost 10 minutes past 7, and right away. Now, I see a couple of us here: Albina, Adriana, Upuni Asare, and Faustina. Okay, welcome and good evening once more. Let me begin by asking, does anybody have any special questions for clarification that you would like to resolve? Let's begin from there, and then summarize what we're going to do today, and give you a hint about the final exam. But has any special questions?
Yes, Professor.
All right, go ahead.
It's based on the final paper.
Ask your question.
The list you gave below, are we supposed to select one topic out of the?
No. Those are supposed to give you ideas, or at least some kind of guidance, even guidelines, just guidance on areas from which you may be able to select a topic. Okay. Let me go to the list you're talking about. I hope something, or we're thinking the same thing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
All right, let me see if I can share. Okay, so you're talking about a list here that says bibliographical selection may address topics from comparative international policies, historical analysis of different countries. Now, let me just take an example of comparative international policies. Suppose you were to say, compare imprisonment or legal actions against users of heroin in Sweden and in Holland or in the United States. You can pick 4 articles from Sweden and 4 articles from the United States. Now, be careful how you just select articles, because you could select articles that are totally disparate in terms of the issues they address. For example, if you select 2 papers on say possession, okay, say punishment for possession compared to punishment for possession in America, then all your articles must be on maybe examples of people that have been imprisoned for possession, while in Sweden, you say usually possession, if it's less than so, it's only 2 weeks in prison, while in America, it's 10 years. You can actually say in Sweden, whether you are a celebrity or you are an ordinary person, the punishment is the same. And I'll give you an example about somebody who was caught using cocaine. I don't know if you have ever seen the vehicle called the DeLorean. Okay. There was this guy, very powerful guy, who was, an automobile company executive in the United States. He lost his job and he set up a manufacturing plant for a vehicle he designed in Ireland called the DeLorean. And he was running out of money and he wanted to raise capital. And so he began to distribute cocaine and actually had some cocaine imported, which would have given him like $20–30 million. And the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, kind of like tailed him. They set him up and they caught him red-handed, importing cocaine that he was going to distribute, that would give him lots of money. And so they took him to court. They kind of like prosecuted him on criminal charges. And so when they got there, they say, well, he was set up. But the point of the matter is that he was also doing it, except at this particular time that they actually went and caught him on camera and everything, it was a setup. If he wasn't the kind of powerful person with all that money that was known in GM or one of the automobile companies, I don't think that being set up would have been an excuse for the court to dismiss his case. Okay, I don't think so. Okay, but you can bring like 3 papers that show the same kind of evidence. An ordinary person from the neighborhoods who was set up, and DeLorean, a powerful person who was set up, and one person's case was dismissed, and another person's case put them in jail. You can do that. You can do it, say, inconsistencies in the punishment of people for possession or distribution. But you have to bring a couple of articles that show that this is not just one article. Or you can even use that as an example. Well, here is one example of somebody who was dismissed, okay? So this is what I mean here. You can take socioeconomic analysis of drugs or drug policy. You can talk about the differences between how ordinary persons are treated, but get articles that really show that this is a pattern. Okay, all right. So, within those topics, those examples are listed. You can pick a topic. All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other question?
Yes, Professor. You said there was an example of the term paper.
Mm-hmm.
What our paper should look like.
Okay. Here you see where I have that project due.
Yes.
Click on it. You see an example. Project sample.
Okay. Okay. I see. Thank you.
All right. Any other question? These 2 questions actually are very good questions, excellent questions that clarifies issues for everybody to see. In that way, nobody can say things were not clear to them. Very often students go and read disparate articles that just like they're not connected to each other in terms of a topic, in terms of an issue, and then they wonder why they did not score high on the term project. All right, I'm going to stop this share. I'm not going to put up any other share. Let's talk about, again, like we did last week, to clarify how you should approach questions. And I saw in the last graded homework assignment that students actually now on better how to approach questions. Don't just go on the internet and try to copy and paste something without reference to concepts, okay? Students were able to answer questions by, first of all, defining a concept like the deviance approach to drug policies and perspectives. And then after they define, say, the deviance or the rational approach or the Marxist approach, then actually perspectives, this time not approach yet, perspectives, then they would then go and apply it to a question, okay? So, there are perspectives, there are approaches, and today I'm going to talk about approaches in the drug wars. And within an approach, the different perspectives, the rationale, the deviance, the dialectic materialism can be applied to these different approaches. Okay, so I'm going to define the supply side approach and provide you an example of course, there is the supply side approach and there is the demand side approach. Okay, now the supply side approach to drug policy refers to attempts to reduce the supply of drugs. Okay, attempts to reduce the supply of drugs, and that there are different. That is the supply of illicit drugs, or the harmful psychographic. I'm sorry, the harmful psychotropic drugs or psychoactive drugs. Supply approach tries to reduce the supply, the production, and the distribution of substances. Now, there are different, the demand side tries to discourage the demand and, of course, the use of psychoactive or the illicit psychoactive drugs. And so, what are the different approaches that the supply side uses? Okay, what are the different approaches? One approach is to encourage people to find alternative ways of making money. Okay. Incentives can be provided. Now, where does cocaine come from? Where does opium come from? Opium comes mostly from the Far East, the Middle East. Principally the Middle East. That's where opium comes from. That's where it grows naturally. And so attempts are made to, say, discourage the farmers of opium from exporting the illegal, the surplus. Only the legal production is encouraged because it's used for medicinal purposes. And besides, say, anesthesia, opium also is used for as a painkiller. Okay, this is a painkiller. So, in Central and South America, the United Nations, UNICEF, try to encourage farmers to grow alternative crops. Okay. That's the supply side approach. Now, another supply side approach will be to interdict the importation of drugs, because the border patrols of the United States government arresting people and putting people in jail for distribution. That's the supply side approach. Okay. Now, depending on whether you have the deviance perspective or whether you have the rational perspective or even the Marxist historical materialism perspective, the way you apply the supply side approach will be different. Okay. So those who have this deviance perspective take it that the deviants are people that violate the norms of society, people that are, you can quote unquote call them the bad guys, people who are ill-behaved, and so they engage in the supply of an illicit drug because there's a lot of money involved in it. And so, And so the way to deal with distributors or those who produce the cocaine in South America is to use military force or to use police force to essentially disrupt process. So we use the disruptive approach. The Marxists will simply say that the solution to it is to actually equalize power between the working classes and the capitalist classes. And once you do that, then the production of drug will naturally be something that people will say it's wrong, just morally wrong, and so they stop it. Okay. Now I want to clarify something before, excuse me, before I continue. When I pose the question, how would you apply the deviance perspective to the problem? I encountered that same thing of going on the internet and they're copying something and pasting it. And so I saw a lot of people, not a lot of people, several people, maybe 1/3 of the class. They say that the deviance perspective is about statistics and means and what have you. I think that is totally wrong. Okay? When you see deviance, we don't use deviance in statistics. Okay? We use deviation. Okay? And so that idea of deviance and deviation should not be mixed together. Okay? Because I saw people talking about means and the use of statistics. No. Okay? I mean, applications of deviation and means and statistics do not apply here, except you're trying to analyze a particular situation and you talk about the average, price of drugs across places, and you talk about deviation and similarities or variations. So don't bring it here. Deviance is a sociological theory. It's a sociological concept, which simply means behavior that is different from the accepted norm. Okay. So let's make that clear. Okay. So now the demand side is an attempt, the demand approach to the drug war policy simply is it's an approach that discourages use of drugs. And so the approach generally is through education, so that people do not use drugs, that this is harmful. And those who become addicted, they provided medical assistance so as to say detoxify them. That is the demand side. And so how would deviance theory, how would the deviance analytical perspective approach the demand side? Okay. Now, the deviance analytical perspective, again, simply says that those who are using these drugs are people who are bad, people who are devious in their behavior. These are people who are deviating from the acceptable norms. And so how do you stop them from using drugs, which is the demand side, okay? Because the supply side is to provide the drug, the demand side is to use it. And so those who have this deviance analytical perspective will simply arrest people, incarcerate them for the use of drugs, okay? Even for possession. Now, the rational perspective would engage in education, okay? Would try to provide medical assistance, will try to find out why people are doing this. Are they doing it because they want to get away from their difficulties, And so not only would you try to educate them, but you also try to resolve their difficulties. If somebody is using drugs because they're frustrated, they cannot get a job, you give them, you provide them training to get skills so that they can go and get a job and their frustrations may well go away. So the other thing that I want to talk about is, of course, the approaches, say the deviance analytical perspective approach of incarceration or of destroying crops, of interdicting crops. When, say, the United States, a superpower, is trying to fight back against the importation of drugs, they may engage in, there are two ways, okay? Again, one is, comes from the theory of power of realism, which is based on the premise, based on the axiom that whenever two groups are in an interaction, there's this competition where dominance is the objective, where one side must dominate the other side. And so, superpowers like England and the United States engage in what is called unilateral foreign policy. Unilateral meaning a decision that is made in foreign policy that one imposes on the other one. And whether or not, whether it's about exportation of drugs or the interdiction of drugs, unilateral foreign policy can be applied. Now, the rational analytical perspective would rather apply foreign policy through negotiation, through bargaining, okay? And so, again, you can see that you can apply the rational perspective or the deviance perspective, and then, decide how foreign policy is implemented either through unilateral foreign policy or through negotiated rational cooperation. Essentially, this is what the rational perspective will take, is cooperation. And of course, the Marxist perspective will simply say that if you can resolve the alienation of the working class, then nations, say constituencies across nations will simply cooperate because there'll be no need for the struggle between the working class and the capitalist class, as that controls capital, and you wouldn't have any need for conflict, because they believe that the reason nations have conflicts is that you have, capitalist groups in different countries who are simply working with each other to exploit everybody. So now, having said that, I'm going to essentially stop there. What I have done is to give you a synopsis of the concepts that I would want you to look at. And so when you read the documents, that will have been assigned and will continue to be assigned until Monday next week, please bear in mind that you should be looking at these documents and applying the concepts to the conclusions that you might reach. Now, your exam will be posted and will be due on Tuesday next week. So I'm going to post them Monday afternoon, and you have until Tuesday night, the 24th, to submit them. Please remember that begins on the 25th, that is the spring semester. And so you have to do everything by the 24th so that you can get your grades on the 25th. And if you need this class to take another class, or at least you have passed or you have not passed, so you can prepare yourself properly for spring. So having said that, does anybody have any questions? Questions? Yeah. Hearing none. I wish you all a good evening, a good weekend, and also I would say I was glad to have you all in this class for the winter session. And so I hope you've got something out of this class.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good evening.
Right.